Welcome to the release of the 5th annual Closing the Expectations Gap report by Achieve in our work on the American Diploma Project. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mike Cohen, and I'm the president of Achieve. And shortly I will introduce the panel, but I just want to sort of take a few minutes to set the stage for the discussion that we're going to have today. For those of you who I think probably have followed this work a bit, you know that it was 5 years ago that National Governors Association and Achieve co-hosted a national education summit on high school reform. We brought together governors, business leaders, K-12, and post-secondary leaders from nearly every state to begin to tackle the problem of high school reform. At that summit, at that discussion, there was an awful lot of evidence presented and discussed and weighed and debated and considered, evidence that indicated that there was, first of all, significant performance problems with our secondary schools, that way too many young people were graduating from high school, earning a diploma, but lacking the skills and preparation they needed to succeed after they completed high school. They weren't prepared for post-secondary education, they weren't prepared for workforce training, they weren't well prepared for the jobs of the future. This was a problem both for the individuals involved, who were going to have a difficult time making their way through their adult life and being able to earn a decent living and support a family. It's a problem for the states and the nation because it would not enable us to grow the economy the way we needed and provide the kind of jobs that are needed. And it's a problem from our democracy because we wouldn't have an educated and well-prepared citizenry to sustain our way of life. And that's for the students who graduated. The related part of the performance problem was roughly 30% of the students who started high school didn't even graduate, and they, for the most part, were less well prepared than those who did. So evidence about significant performance problems dominated the discussion. Second bit of evidence that got a lot of attention is evidence about an expectations gap. There was growing research that showed, including some that Achieve did, that showed a gap between what we required students to do in most states in order to earn a high school diploma and what they needed to know and be able to do when they graduated from high school in order to succeed afterwards. And at the summit, the American Diploma Project network was formed to help states close this expectations gap. At the time, leaders from 13 states, governors, business leaders, K-12, and higher education leaders, came together to agree to work on a common policy agenda of aligning the standards, the curriculum and graduation requirements, the assessments, and the accountability indicators that are used in K-12 education with the demands of post-secondary education and work. As I said, 13 states came together to form that network. As you'll hear in a little bit, there are now 35 states that are participating in that network. Each year since the network was formed, we have put out an annual report based on a survey of all 50 states to track the progress and activity of states in addressing this policy agenda. This year, again, is the 5th report. We will share the findings of that with you shortly. But before we do that, I want to step back a bit and, because it's 5 years, consider the ways in which the collective action of states has changed the national environment around these issues. And I want to highlight 3 things that strike us at Achieve as particularly important. First and foremost, college and career readiness is now a national priority as a result of the leadership of states. When this started in 2005, the states and a small number of organizations and foundations were talking about college and career readiness. Now, frankly, you can't turn any place in education without running into this agenda. And this is important because it is beginning to fundamentally change the mission of the K-12 education system. We're not going to have a system as we go forward that prepares some students for a high-skill, high-wage knowledge economy and other students for dead-end jobs. We're preparing everybody to have options to make choices and have good opportunities when they complete high school. It's a fundamental change in the mission and will require a lot more than just changes in expectations and policies, but really quite systemic changes in the system overall. Among those, not only those, but among those is a different relationship between the K-12 and post-secondary system. This is not just a matter of the higher ed system offering its advice to the K-12 system on what its expectations ought to be. This is a matter of the post-secondary system taking the obligation and the opportunity and the responsibility to define its expectations clearly and to change how it behaves in relationship to them, whether it's placement policies or what they do with first-year courses or how they hold themselves accountable. This is systemic change between K-12 and post-secondary. So again, one big impact is the college and career readiness is now part of the national agenda. You see that in a growing number of states, you see that in a growing number of nonprofit organizations and foundations, and you see that beginning to see that in how the federal government thinks about its role going forward. Second big impact from the work that states in the ADP network has done is they created the foundation for the current effort for Common Core standards. And the way that happened is important. In the states in the ADP network were working one at a time, although with help from Achieve, to revise their own standards, to work between K-12 and higher ed and employers to define college and career readiness, to look at the best available evidence that can inform those decisions and that judgment, and to change their standards at the K-12 system accordingly. When they did that, as a result of trying to understand the real-world demands that students will face, their standards began to come together. We literally could identify a common core among almost 20 states that adopted math and English standards about a year and a half ago when we did our analysis. And the reason we could find a common core is because it turns out the real-world demands that students face do not depend on the boundaries of the state in which they live. They're all competing in a global economy, preparing for careers in post-secondary institutions that are really global in nature. So anchoring standards in real-world demands turns out to be a force to create more common standards. Having done that, having arrived at a point where we could find among 15 to 20 states a common core of standards, it made it possible to think about approaching a problem that we had never done before. There's for a long time been a demand in this country for more consistent expectations among states because of the common situations that students will face. And we used to think the only answer to that was that the federal government could cause that problem to be fixed. What the states in this network demonstrated is that the states can work together to fix that problem and do it just fine. And that's what gave birth to, or helped give birth to, and provide a foundation for the Common Core State Standards Initiative. Dane Linn from NGA is here with us, and you will hear more about that from him shortly. So again, so far, two big national impacts. We've made college and career readiness a national priority, and we've demonstrated that states can lead the way on Common Core standards. The third big impact we saw, partly from the ADP network, where a dozen states came together to create a common exam for Algebra 2 and for Algebra 1. About the same time that a group of states in New England were creating common standards and assessments up there. And again, we've now demonstrated the feasibility of states working together to develop common assessments so that they can have a consistent measure of student performance across state boundaries. And it's not just common tests, it's common performance levels, common cut scores, and the like that has been unheard of in this country, but we're now beginning to see that it is possible to do. And states around the country now are getting ready to compete for federal funds to take what's been demonstrated and move that to a national scale. So I think those are three pretty significant developments. And what they have in common is that they are led by states. This was done in an environment in which the federal government did not have policy and the federal government was not setting mandates. The states had the room to do this. They saw a need to take on these issues in order to improve their education system, and they've demonstrated that they can actually move in that direction pretty successfully. And we'll be seeing a conversation about federal policy in this area. You're already seeing it, and I suspect we will have some questions about this when our presentations and panel discussion ends. But what's important here is that the states are setting a context in which the federal government can play an enormously supportive role, not preempting what states do, not subverting what states do, but in fact supporting the leadership that they're providing. And we hope that that's the kind of conversation that will occur between states and the federal government as we go forward. So I just wanted to set that context as the panel discussion begins. What I'd like to do now is introduce the panelists to you. We're going to start with my colleague to my left, John Kraman, who's the Associate Director of Research at Achieve. He's led the study and whose results he will report to you. He's done a superb job on that. I also want to acknowledge Maria O'Hara, who's worked very closely with him on producing this study. I want to thank them both for a great job on producing this report. After John speaks, we will hear from Governor Bredesen from Tennessee. Governor Bredesen is significant in a number of ways here. He co-chairs Achieve's board, so we're particularly pleased to have him here and have his support. Tennessee is a state that has made enormous gains on this policy agenda in a relatively short period of time, having started literally from sort of scratch at the point of the summit, and have, as you will see, made tremendous gains in reshaping the expectations for young people in Tennessee in ways that make it really a national leader among states. And if you read the blogs just today, you know that they're already slated to win the Race to the Top grant, just on the virtue of the work that they've done with Achieve. So we're looking forward to getting a small portion of that money once the grant arrives. If someone would call Secretary Duncan and let him know to make these arrangements, we'd really appreciate that. And then third, we're joined by my good friend and colleague, Dane Linn, who is the Director of the Education Program at NGA. We work very closely with Dane and NGA when we put the summit on. We've been working very closely with Dane and NGA and CCSSO on the Common Core standards, and we're really pleased that Dane could be here to participate in this discussion as well. So without further ado, let me ask John to step up and highlight the key findings from the report. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Mike. Before I jump into the findings, I want to quickly just touch base on a couple points that Mike made. For the purposes of the report on the findings, I'll follow along the policy agenda that Mike laid out before, talking about aligned standards, aligned graduation requirements, assessments, data systems, and accountability systems. And in addition, Mike mentioned the growth of the ADP network from 13 states in 2005 to 35 today. The map here shows the 35 states, but it is worth noting that the survey was of all 50 states. We surveyed the departments in all 50 states and the District of Columbia, and again, all the states responded, which was a great thing to happen. So the first policy area is standards. Aligned content standards serve as the foundation for state education systems. Standards provide the underpinnings for decisions regarding curriculum, instruction, and assessments, and they communicate core knowledge and skills to teachers, parents, and students. In the survey, we asked states whether they had developed and adopted state high school academic content standards in English and mathematics that are aligned to college and career-ready expectations. At the time of the summit, only 3 states had actually, in fact, adopted high school standards with this alignment in place. Today, in 2010, the number of states with aligned high school standards has grown to 31. The number of this number 31 includes 8 states that have just adopted their new standards in the past year, and those states are Alabama, Colorado, Florida, New Mexico, North Carolina, Oregon, South Carolina, and Virginia. The second policy area is graduation requirements. College and career-ready graduation requirements ensure that all students graduate with the core foundational knowledge and skills necessary to be successful after high school. And that includes students who go to four-year universities, colleges or universities, community colleges, technical colleges, and programs and apprenticeships, or receive significant on-the-job training. Stopping short of the college and career-ready level closes doors to students and limits their opportunities after they've graduated. In response to the greater, just to illustrate this a little bit, in response to the greater expectations that await students after high school, many states have in fact raised their graduation requirements to the college and career-ready level. As part of this effort and to reinforce the importance of these requirements, several states have gone beyond raising the requirements to actually communicate and coordinate with higher education to align the courses required for graduation from high school with the courses required for college admissions. Other states have also gone to the point to a policy area approach where they provide financial incentives for students to receive who complete these requirements to help them pay for college. The state of Indiana has gone even further, and next year students will be required not only to earn their college and career diploma called the Core 40, will be required for not only graduation but also for eligibility for financial aid at college and even admissions to the public four-year colleges and universities. In the survey, we asked states whether they require now all students to complete a college and career-ready curriculum in order to earn a diploma. At the time of the summit, 3 states had raised their requirements to this level. Today, in 2010, the number of states with college and career-ready graduation requirements has grown to 21, and this includes Nebraska, the only state in the last year to raise new requirements. The third policy area is assessments. Most tests that high school students take measure content that is typically found early in high school or even in middle school. These tests fail to assess the advanced high school content that is necessary to be successful in college or in the post-secondary education and training programs that students enter. As an example of a high school assessment that is anchored to college and career expectations, California has implemented the Early Assessment Program. This EAP program combines test items developed by the faculty of the CSU system, California State University system, with items from the state's 11th grade CST tests, including their Algebra 2 end of course exam. The results on the EAP give students an early signal regarding their readiness for college level coursework and provide guidance to them on how to best make use of their 12th grade year. In the survey, we asked states whether they administer to all students an assessment of college and career-ready knowledge and skills capable of producing a readiness score that is used by post-secondary institutions such as the EAP. At the time of the summit, 3 states were administering such college and career assessments to all students. And today, the number of states with college and career assessments is 14. And this includes 4 new states from the past year: Alabama, Hawaii, Louisiana, and West Virginia. The fourth policy area is P20 longitudinal data systems. Critical to the success of the college and career agenda is the ability of states to collect, coordinate, and use secondary and post-secondary longitudinal student-level data to improve the readiness of graduates to succeed in college and the workplace. In the survey, we asked states whether they annually match longitudinal student-level records from K-12 with the data from their post-secondary system. At the time of the summit, 3 states were annually matching K-12 and post-secondary data. Today, the number of states with P20 data systems is 16, including 5 new states in the past year: Alabama, Alaska, Georgia, Nevada, and Pennsylvania. The fifth and final policy area is accountability. Accountability systems set expectations and send signals to teachers and to school systems about what is most important. Without an accountability system that values college and career readiness, our high schools will not be focused on the preparation of all students for their next steps in life. In the survey, we asked states whether they collect data on a set of fundamental college and career ready indicators, and more importantly, whether they use those indicators to drive improvement in schools and in school systems. The 4 indicators are defined as the percentage of students in each high school who earn a college and career ready diploma, score college ready on a high school assessment, earn college credit while still in high school, such as through a dual enrollment program or by scoring 3 on an advanced placement exam. And for those who enroll in college, the students who are required to take remedial or developmental courses that cover high school level content and do not count toward a high school degree. For the 4 uses, we ask states whether they publicly report at the school level on each of the college and career ready indicators. As an example, Hawaii has a college and career readiness indicators report that includes, for each high school in the state, the percentage of students earning a college ready diploma, college and career ready level diploma, and in Hawaii it's called the State Board of Education Recognition or Step-Up Diploma, as well as an array of other meaningful indicators that they organize into categories of approaching, meeting, and exceeding college and career readiness. We also ask states whether they publicly set statewide performance goals for each of the indicators that go beyond where their high schools are today. We ask whether they provide positive incentives to schools for improvement on each of the indicators, such as with recognition or with financial rewards. And we also ask whether they factor the college and career ready indicators into their state accountability formula. As an example, Florida's new high school accountability system, just approved this past year, shifts away from results on the FCAT, the 10th grade FCAT exam, and will now include a cohort graduation rate, information about the advanced course taking and success on those courses of their students in high school, and performance on measures of college readiness. Looking back to the time of the summit, no state had adopted a comprehensive set or a comprehensive approach to accountability focused on these indicators and uses, and today only Texas makes wide use of all 4 critical indicators to measure and incentivize college and career readiness. This is not to say that other states do not also use indicators in their accountability systems. In fact, 21 others do. In this table here, it's a little bit complex, and I'll try to quickly walk you through it just in broad strokes. The table here shows the number or the distribution of states across the various indicators and uses. And so, for example, you'll see that 8 states publicly report the percentage of students who earn a college and career-ready diploma. And then you can kind of work out the rest, and this is, more information about this is in the report itself. So, looking beyond Texas, there are 7 states that publicly report and or set goals for multiple indicators of college and career readiness. And 2 additional states factor multiple indicators into their accountability formula. So in the report, you'll find that there's much more detailed information about the both substantial and sustained progress states have made on the college and career readiness agenda. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Mike. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. And John's given us a 50-state overview. We're going to now turn our attention to one state that has made an awful lot of progress on these policies. And so I'd like to call Governor Bredesen up. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Mike. I wanted to talk with you just for a few minutes about the experience that the state of Tennessee has had in moving down these roads. I'm toward the end of my time as governor. I'm in my 8th year with a number of months left to go. And about 5 years ago, when that summit was held, I think Tennessee is one of the states that really engaged with it and said, "Look, this is something we need to pay attention to." And in particular, we had concern that the standards against which we were measuring our students were not workable. We're not working. We're set way too easy. It came home to me when I looked at some of the numbers. We give a test, a math test, to our 8th graders as they leave 8th grade. When they took our state of Tennessee test, we told 81% of them that they were proficient in math at that level. When the same students took the NAEP test, 21% of them were proficient against those set of standards. Obviously, something very, very wrong there. Some of this has actually perversely been driven by NCLB, and was something that we needed to address. We also were very aware in our higher education system of how much remedial work was needing to be done with freshmen who came into our public universities. To address this, we began working with the chief. And really liked the approach that they brought to this. First of all, it was a repository of a lot of knowledge about how to go about doing this, including knowledge about how other states were being successful in making these things happen. And second of all, we just liked the general approach of doing this from the ground up, of building it from the ground up, of not coming up here and petitioning Congress to tell us how to fix these things, but to settle down and figure out how we might do that. The big issues in our minds were setting standards high and aligning them to the needs of our higher education system and our workforce and our companies. And I guess there's now a phrase of art that describes that, I guess college and career readiness or something like that. But the idea was to take these students who are going on into either higher education and the workforce and make sure they had the tools that it took to make that happen. To do that, we involved at great length expertise from both of those areas, really for a couple of reasons. First of all, if you're going to make students ready for college or the workplace, it wouldn't hurt to ask someone who runs the colleges and runs the workplaces exactly what that means and what kind of skills the students needed. And while some things were predictable, some things were news to us and actually helped very much in designing what we were doing. Second of all, in anything in politics or in government, it's so hard to keep a consistent approach to it over a period of time. You start off in one direction, governors change, parties change, control of the legislature changes, and suddenly you're veering off in some new direction. The feeling was really that both the higher education institutions and the business community were anchors. They were places of stability that, if they bought into these and were sold on them, could help keep successive generations of political figures focused in the same direction. And if we do these things over a period of a decade and 2 decades, you really make some fundamental difference in the way the system works. We developed the new standards with the chief's help. We got them adopted by the school board. We're in the process right now, literally, of designing the assessments that go with them. The business community is actually stepping up and taking some real ownership of this. In fact, Bill Frist, no stranger to a lot of you here, put together an organization called SCORE in Tennessee, which is really designed to kind of pick up the flag and to carry it forward on this issue of standards. This stuff, as I talked to other governors, we were all just up here last weekend, as you probably know, for the Governors Association annual meeting. It's going on in a lot of states, and it's been going on for quite some time now. It's something which is being discovered by Washington right now. I think it was last week when we were here that the president started talking about tying this stuff to Title I funds. Some of the various think tanks are starting to weigh in on whether common standards are a good idea and the like. And I've actually started getting, as have other governors, a lot of questions about, is this a good thing or not? Obviously, to the extent to which the federal government will get behind and support this movement, that's a wonderful thing. I think it really helps. To the extent to which they say, okay, you guys have taken it a little way down the road, we got it now, that's not a good thing. And, when asked the question about overreaching, I guess my feeling is the federal government will always overreach on these things, but we need to take it as far as we possibly can down the road toward success before that happens. The issue is, the whole issue in this is ownership. Our education systems are they're so diverse, they have so much independence, there are so many different views about how they operate, that they're very resistant to top-down control. You've got to be really heavy-handed to exercise that. And to me, the whole approach to this had to be to develop that ownership amongst the businesses and the local communities, higher education, the school superintendents, the teachers who taught in these classrooms. To get that done, you've got to build build it from the bottom up. And of course, that is a process that takes longer. It is a lot messier. It involves more compromises than simply doing it in some place. But what you end up with, I think, is something which is, first of all, far less partisan. This whole issue in Tennessee had no partisan component to it. I can't think of anything we did where people disagreed, that the disagreement was along partisan lines. And second of all, it produces something which, with that ownership, has the ability to continue on and to continue in place. In any event, as the federal government gets more involved in this, I think it's really important for the states to have taken it as far as they possibly can. There are limitations to what states can do, but they're very good at putting realism into things and understanding, helping people understand how things really fit on the ground and how things are actually likely to work out there. It has been a great process for us. Achieve has been a huge help in that process, and just as some of the early work that you did got our attention, I suspect, having seen the stuff you're doing here, that as the years go on, the work that comes out of this organization is going to continue to get the attention of governors and of state legislatures in the kinds of things that need to be done in our education system. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Governor, and we certainly do hope that we continue to get the attention of governors and legislatures as time goes on and keep this agenda moving forward. All three of us have talked in one way or another about what states have done together and how that's provided a foundation for the Common Core effort. So I'd like to now introduce Linn, who is leading the Common Core effort and has been a partner of Achieve's since the summit on this set of issues. And Dane?
Thanks, Mike. So I have time, not so much for a joke, but just to say, I wish could say that I had more hair before this initiative than I do now, but nevertheless, thanks for having me here this afternoon. I'm really glad to participate in this report, and if for nothing else, as you read through the report, you're really able to see the significant progress that we've made over the past couple of years. And what's so encouraging about the day that John's walked through this afternoon is that we've essentially moved beyond the rhetoric, and you've actually seen policy change. And not just program change, but policy change in thinking about how the standards worked connects to the assessments, the accountability, so that we're really trying to change the system, a set of policies. And I think that's the beauty of not just the numbers that John's walked through, but it's the beauty of the work that Achieve, NGA, and the other organizations have been working toward over the past couple of years. But at the same time, this data shows us that a significant amount of work remains. And we have to figure out how we push the states that have not made as much progress over the past couple of years. And we have some beacons. We have places like Tennessee and others that we can point to. So for the states that have not made as much progress, we can mentor them, we can partner them so that they can see what the policy might look like. Yes, the dynamics in California might be different, maybe not the best state to use, but the dynamics in states change from place to place. And we take that context and we adapt it, but ultimately we have a foundation of policy that can be modeled from state to state. For governors, and as Governor Bredesen mentioned, we had the governors in town last weekend, and a lot of our conversation is really around competitiveness and how are we going to be more competitive, and largely that's got to happen through the educational system. One way that we've tried to advance this college and career readiness agenda at NGA is by pointing back to the report that NGA and Achieve issued at the 2005 summit. And we essentially laid out a policy framework of 5 policy pillars and have tried to encourage governors to move the agenda around college and career readiness for each of those 5 policy pillars. And that's remained the framework to this day, of which standards, college and career readiness standards, are a part of it. I think one of the most significant accomplishments that we've had related to that agenda is the commitment that states made, or governors made, on the calculation of the graduation rate. And not only were we able to bring the 6 authors of 6 different reports using 6 different methodologies to calculate the graduation rate, but we ultimately came up with one. And today we have over half the states, or approximately half the states, are not only just calculating but publicly reporting what those grad rates are. And by 2011, we'll have almost every state reporting and calculating using that quality measure. For example, in Governor Tim Pawlenty's state of Minnesota, they've developed 6 power indicators to improve the grad rate, and they've also developed an early warning indicator system to identify possible dropout rates. Related to this agenda, you know that many states have embarked on a STEM agenda, science, technology, engineering, and math, as one way to ensure their competitiveness. And I think the leader of the pack, for us at least, in the work that NGA's done, has been that in Ohio, Governor Strickland's work, where he's essentially tried to create a statewide STEM system across the state to coordinate the regional efforts. So, for example, up in the Dayton area, where they've pulled together public universities, private colleges, the business community, to develop a STEM agenda that's really tied to what those regional workforce needs are, both current and some of the projected workforce needs. And we know that Governor Bredesen in Tennessee has also developed a similar partnership with Battelle to advance a STEM agenda. Now, what you may all be most interested in is where are we with the Common Core Standards Initiative. So this is an attempt to reduce the number of questions we might get, or at least address some of the questions you might have before we open the floor. Many of you have seen the college and career readiness standards that NGA, the Council of Chief State School Officers, in partnership with Achieve and other organizations have been spending the past several months developing. Just as a reminder, those standards are on the website, corestandards.org. And it's really the set of college and career readiness standards that we developed over the past several months that have guided the recent effort to develop the K-12 standards. You'll see those standards released next week. We'll open them for public comment, much like we did the college and career readiness standards. And at that point, we will work through the comments. If the college and career readiness standards are any indication, we will probably have more than the 1,100 that we received from the first set, because this is where, quite honestly, where the rubber hits the road. We're going to be developing or releasing these K-12 standards in English, language arts, and mathematics, and we hope that you'll take an opportunity to review them as well. We have really spent a significant amount of time vetting these standards with the states. They've had 3 opportunities to give us feedback on the draft standards, and we have spent a significant amount of time with core teams in several of these states to walk through not just discussions, but comparisons of the K-12 standards to the standards that they currently have in place. We're particularly interested in the feedback of leading states, and it comes to no surprise that Massachusetts is one of those. We want to learn from some of those leading states, just as we're trying to learn from other countries. We've also included many national organizations, and we've been meeting with teachers from around the country as convened by AFT and the NEA. We've worked with national organizations in the content areas, the National Council on Teachers for Mathematics, English as well, and we couldn't forget the higher ed community, because ultimately, if we want the students to be college and career ready, we need the colleges and universities to provide feedback. And so we have worked with ACE, the American Council on Education, and many others to be a part of reacting to the initial K-12 standards. We feel really good about this standard, the set of standards that you're going to see next week, and think that they do hold up they do hold up to what we see in other top-performing countries. Our work groups have poured through thousands, literally, of documents to inform these standards, not just states, but other countries and organizations from other countries as well, namely groups like OECD and Paris. So we hope that you'll take an opportunity to look at these standards, and we look forward to the partnership that we'll continue to have with Achieve as we all work toward the college and career readiness agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Dane, and please join me, first of all, in thanking all of our panelists for their remarks. We have given you an overview of the progress that has been made by the states on this college and career readiness policy agenda. We've given you a deeper dive into what one state, Tennessee, has done to really make progress in this area and keep it sustainable over time. We've given you a bit of a picture about how this agenda relates to other things going on, including in particular the Common Core standards work, but STEM initiatives and others as well. And what we'd like to do now is be able to take your questions and respond to the issues that are on your mind. So this is an opportunity to ask questions. We've got, looks like, 2 microphones. If you raise your hand, we'll make sure someone gets to you and give you a chance to speak. And if you would identify yourself, please, when you do.
Hi, Beth Foley, National Education Association. Thanks for having this event, and also thanks to NGA and Chiefs and the governors individually for making this an open process. That's made it a really trustworthy process, I think. One thing we've been talking about at NEA is how do you feel about, one more C, we've got CCR, Career College Ready. What about citizenship, preparing for citizenship, given the diversity of our country and of our schools and our states?
Well, thank you for that question. As I indicated, I think earlier in my comments, knowledge and skills that are needed to prepare students for post-secondary success ought to prepare them for college, for career, and for citizenship. There's not been a separate effort to develop citizenship-ready standards, and I think that would be a more challenging effort than what any of us has taken on. But I do think as this work goes forward, there's an opportunity to really think through how to make those connections. I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on that.
Mind if I say something? First of all, I think you are exactly right, and I don't think it's about teaching citizenship per se, but just making sure that people have the analytical skills it takes to decide if people like me are telling them a bunch of nonsense or something straightforward. And I just think it's in some ways even more important than the jobs aspect. I think, of course, you need to have a good job to be able to prosper and take care of your family. But since the days of the founders, people have recognized that I think that in a democracy, an educated citizenry is absolutely essential, and without it, you won't have your democracy very long.
Thank you.
I would hope that as the conversation moves forward from adoption to implementation of the standards, that we think about curriculum more thoroughly, and it's a way to weave this issue of citizenry throughout the curriculum.
Thank you. Other questions? It's a little hard to see. Yes, sir.
Eric Roblin, there it is, with the newspaper Education Week. The obligatory federal question or two, actually 2 if you don't mind, that are hopefully related in some way.
Are they both obligatory questions?
The first one is, with the president's recent announcement of wanting to tie federal Title I aid to college and career ready standards, can we infer, do you think, from this report that there are 31 states who are pretty much ready to meet that threshold? And then the second question is to this larger issue the governor has touched on a little bit already. Is there any sort of collective wince when the federal, the president and the federal government, first with Race to the Top, now with this proposal, in various ways is sort of getting its hand into this? I know that on some level, those who want to see this happen are probably thrilled, but on the other hand, it raises a lot of suspicions from various sectors.
So, very good questions. You'll get slightly different answers from each of us, I think. Let me just give a quick answer and then turn to the governor and to Dane. When I think about what the administration has proposed in general, where things are going, what strikes me is this is an occasion in which the states are providing the leadership, and it's very important for the federal government to adjust its policies so that it actually supports where the states are going. The alternative would either be to have policies in place that are pushing in the opposite direction. That's one of the things that many people were concerned about with No Child Left Behind, that it provided incentive to lower, not raise standards. So the alternative is either pushing in the opposite direction or just running off in some totally different direction. So I think getting the federal efforts and the state efforts lined up looks pretty promising to me, though it's not a simple matter to do. And with regard to the number of states that are that are ready. We need to see what the details of the administration's proposal is, but it is quite clear that there are 31 states that have adopted at least high school level standards that meet a college and career ready level test. And one of the things that's very important about the Common Core is it takes that and actually back maps it. So you have grade by grade standards that move in that direction. I think states want to get there whether the federal government requires it or not. Governor, did you want to comment? And Dane?
Yeah, in regard to those two things, first of all, in regard to the Title I connection, I think there's an awful lot of water to go over the dam yet on that one before anybody decides what it is. With Race to the Top, there were standards put in there, but they're in essence optional. If you wish to compete effectively for this money, you do these things, whereas Title I is obviously a different matter. I don't think anybody has the guts to withhold Title I money from any state over this issue, so I don't know how it is all going to play out. It's just difficult to imagine that happening. In terms of the federal role, I tried to touch on it earlier. I'm not a tenor or something in believing that somehow states need to be totally separate and independent from the federal government. But I think an awful lot of governors today are really feeling the pressure of a lot of encroachment on things that have historically been state. I see it, I'm going through right now on the subject of health care, where in this health care reform, substantial additional responsibilities have been laid on the states without any particular option in how we handle it or anything else, and a lot of states are getting kind of restive about that. I think that's the direction things are going. I think that as time goes on, you're going to see the federal government step in more aggressively in terms of these things. But if they do so, far better to be building on the foundation that has been generated by Achieve and others from the ground up and has that, I guess, that anchoring and that tie to what's really going on out there in the world, than thinking something up which springs, full blown from the brows of congressional staffers, and I think that what's going on right now really can help to bring some of that, just some of that grounding and that reasonableness to the kinds of things that will happen.
Thank you. Governor, Dane, you want to take a shot?
Eric, on your first question, I would simply say that there's an economies of scale that we can achieve collectively that can't be done by a small group of states or significant but not all of the states. So coming together, particularly as we begin to consider whether or not, or states begin to consider whether or not to adopt the K-12 standards, I think there's a greater ability to do that if we're all working together. The second benefit of working together with the 48 states that we have on board is the notion of internationally benchmarking the standards, so there's been a significant amount of work done, and again, building off of the work achieved, but taking a look at what some of the other top performing countries is another value add of the partnership. And lastly, as Mike has pointed out, to be maybe a little bit more blunt about it, it's nice to see the federal government getting on board with the state agenda. And so whatever they can do to support the implementation of this agenda, support governors and chiefs' implementation of the college and career readiness agenda, I think our children will benefit. At the same time, it's not just about ESEA, it's also about the other parts of implementation. How do we get, for example, HEA and the federal government to align their policies so they're working toward everything that the Secretary has talked about?
Thank you. Other questions? Right here.
Hi, I'm Hans Meter with Meter Consulting Group. I had two questions I present to you, and these are not original questions, but one would be, what would you estimate is the current college and career readiness of the high school graduating class in America? I've seen some previous data. I'm wondering what your current estimate is of that, perhaps at the national level, maybe also at the state level. And then secondly, just to address the issue of as states are raising the overall expectations for what college and career readiness and what high school graduation entails, you also have the phenomenon of high school graduation and trying to improve the graduation rate, and some people will say that those two goals are at odds. So if you could explain how you think the two interact.
Sure. Shouldn't take just but a minute. First of all, on the overall level of college readiness, if you will, of the high school graduating class, in part because we don't have, on a state-by-state or a national basis, some of the tools that we've been talking about, including good assessments, it's hard to do anything other than provide an estimate of that. So, you know, three numbers come to mind, and I suspect the truth is somewhere in the middle. If you look at data that ACT reported a number of years ago, for example, they estimated that only about half of the students, which would be 11th and 12th graders who took the ACT, were reading at a college-ready level, really prepared to deal with the kind of reading that's required in college. If you look at the national remediation rate, right, it is somewhere around 30% of first-year students need to take remedial courses. And when Achieve did a survey a number of years ago of recent high school graduates and asked them, both those in college and those in the workforce, how well prepared do you think you are? How many of you think, in fact, do you think you have some significant gaps in your skills, given where you are now? About 40% of the respondents, both those who were college students as well as those who were employed, about 40% say, you know, now that you asked, I really do have some pretty significant gaps in my skills. And we asked college faculty and employers the same question, and their numbers came out to be the same. So put that together, somewhere between 30 and 50% of the graduates, right, seem to be lacking some significant skills in terms of preparation for post-secondary education. I don't know if others have a different sense of that. Okay.
Hi, my name is Carol Glenn, and I'm from Washington Partners. I recently graduated, and I'm finding that increasingly the jobs that I see require that you have some type of coding or programming knowledge. I was actually fortunate, despite going to an inner city school, being forced to take several years of C++ and Java. I'm wondering whether or not Governor Bredesen, if when you were speaking with people in the business community, whether or not programming was one of the skills that they wanted. And to Mr. Linn, I wanted to know whether or not mainstreaming these courses is part of the agenda for STEM and engineering efforts.
Well, first of all, I can assure you that if you wish to become either a governor or a state legislator, programming knowledge is not required for that. So there's at least one career path, not a very well compensated one, but there's one available for you there. It's interesting. I actually, I'm making a joke, but I used to be a computer programmer, and I guess my sense of it is, I certainly think kids coming out of high school ought to have familiarity with computers. I mean, I think learning to code computers is, you know, to code, and I'm talking about coding now, not learning how to work Word or something like that, you know, is an interesting skill that helps to develop ways of approaching problems and thinking about things like other pieces of math do and the like, to really do the kind of stuff you're loving. If you really want to get good in C++ that you just talked about or something, that probably is a post high school discipline that you'll learn, and is specialized enough that you'll learn it in some specialized way. Having said that, I mean, the basics of doing well in algebra and understanding mathematics and principles of logic and the ability to think through multi-step problems that I think science gives you, I think is one of the prerequisites for learning to do that. It's a subject of some interest to me because my high school degree is, my college degree is in physics. And people often ask me, well, exactly how does that apply to and actually I think degrees in science in various ways are very good preparation for a host of jobs, in that the approaches you learn and the way you go about thinking about problems with that kind of training, I think, is not only needed but can be very successful in careers like in politics or in business and other kinds of places. So, you know, it has a place in the curriculum, but unless you want to do it for a living, I don't know if you need to take it as far as C++.
Thank you. Dane?
And we've tried to, in the development of the K-12 standards, and with feedback from groups like the National Council of Teachers for Mathematics, tried to work on the role, how technology should be addressed through those K-12 standards. We're looking as part of our STEM work to states like North Carolina, who've done a pretty exceptional job in developing technology standards, and trying to use that work as the basis for our work that we'll launch over the next couple of months in STEM, and thinking about technology standards particularly as we move forward.
Let me just add one other thing, or underscore something that the governor said, is we've seen in our work in mathematics, there are ways of reasoning and problem solving, particularly thinking about multiple step problems and taking them all the way through, that are really important to understand and be able to do, not just for mathematics and not just for programming, but for a whole range of real-world problems that people face. And so learning those skills in high school is really important preparation for success in college, for most careers, and getting a really good foundation in that can make a huge difference in terms of one's ability to think and reason analytically. So it's really quite important. Yes?
Hi, Mike Brody from Education Daily. Just kind of a question about Texas. One, what do the results tell you about Texas? And maybe is that one reason that they're not as involved or not involved at all in the Common Core Standards movement?
Well, so far, the results that we portrayed basically has to do with policies that they've adopted. And let's face it, Texas has done a very good job on these policies and has been doing so, and has been a real leader for quite some time. And they deserve credit for that. What relationship that has with their decision to whether to participate in the Common Core is unclear to me, because there are plenty of states that also have rigorous standards and strong accountability systems and the like that are participating in the Common Core. So I suspect there might be something else going on there. Other questions? It's a little hard to see with the lights here, so if you're raising your hand. Eric, another obligatory question?
Only if someone else isn't ready to ask.
Well, so is there anyone else who wants to ask a question? Let's go to Eric and then Hans, as long as we're going around the second time.
So for round two, my question is just, in looking at the data in the report, it is interesting to see you have 31 states, as you note, who had the standards that meet this level, but then the number of states seems to drop with all the other pieces that are so, presumably important to this. Assessments, I think it was less than half of that number, 14. And then obviously when you get to accountability, which some people might see as one of the most important, all of the things that seem in one way or another aimed at sort of helping the rubber hit the road with the standards. And any comment on that generally, and then also in light of the national standards push, where once again you have this question of setting the standards, but then moving beyond that.
So, to me, the main response to that is what everyone in the standards world has been saying for a long time, which is the standards of the foundation for those other policies. So you wouldn't want states rushing off to develop assessments without having figured out what the standards are. So you would expect to see more states adopting standards than the other policies at any given point in time. What's important is that we're beginning to see progress on those others, not as fast as we might like, but things are moving in the right direction. Assessments, again, are harder, as difficult as it is to create standards, assessments are even more difficult and generally take more time. And what we've done is basically in this document, at least in the slides that we showed, sort of credit, if you will, the states that have it in place, or at least have policies in place that are going to go into effect in a specific time. There are more coming up on assessment and accountability indicators, so I expect to see continued growth there. And the opportunity for states to work together on common assessments is having an impact. States are waiting to see how that's going to play out, potentially in some cases before investing in a lot of their own money, though others are doing it because the assessments will take a while. So point is, I think we'll see more progress over time, but we're seeing the progress in the areas you'd expect to see progress in first. Did that answer your question? Good. Hans?
Just the second point about the intersection of raising the expectations and the graduation rate. the question
Yeah.
about raising expectations and also increasing graduation rates.
So I would say two things in response to that, and again, give others on the panel an opportunity to comment as well. One is nobody is talking about simply raising the bar and doing nothing else. The point here is to set the expectations in the right way, but also provide the curriculum, the instructional materials, the supports to teachers and students that are necessary. So this is not just an exercise in asking everybody to jump higher and sitting back and waiting to see if they do that. That said, so that's one answer, is you can't, it's not just raising the bar. But the other thing is worth keeping in mind is before states started setting higher expectations, the national dropout rate was about 30%. So we were losing a lot of kids in a low expectations environment. Setting high standards is not the reason that kids are dropping out of school. There are other things that need to be addressed, whether it's relevance, whether it's personal relationships and the like, whether it's basically giving kids the support and attention that they need is going to be important, whether the expectations are high or low, and we ought to be addressing that at the same time that we're raising graduation requirements. In fact, there's an event going on as we speak or earlier today that the America's Promise held, the Graduation Nation Rate effort, which Achieve has signed on to and lots of other organizations have. So we're working on several fronts at the same time. At the end of the day, you want kids to graduate with a diploma that's meaningful and suggests that they're ready for post-secondary success. Dane, Governor, either you want to comment on this?
Yeah, I'd like to add two things to that, if I might. First of all, if I look down the road to what might go wrong with what we're doing in Tennessee in the years ahead, the overwhelming issue in my mind is that as we tighten up these standards and do things, there are going to be a lot of schools who think they are doing just fine today, who are going to turn out in the glare of a different set of standards to be not doing so great. And it's real easy to sort of imagine the school your child goes to is doing just fine, and it's, I don't know, it's those inner city schools are causing the problem somewhere, and what's going to happen is an awful lot of schools in rural areas and suburban areas that have not historically been on the list of doing this are going to find that they've got some significant competitiveness issues. And human nature being what it is, if you have a choice of solving that dissonance by either changing the rules or working harder, I know which one the temptation is toward. And part of the reason for involving people like the business community is to try to keep everyone's, the superintendents, the political figures' feet to the fire on this process. This whole issue of standards and common standards, it has its roots with me back in something that happened. I have had two government jobs in my life. I was the mayor of Nashville, and now I've been governor for seven years and change. And when I was mayor of Nashville, we put in place something called it was called the core curriculum. It was the stuff that was developed, E.B. Hirsch stuff around that. May or may not have been the right thing to do, but it was a strategy to try to move education forward. And I remember so vividly the first day that we had talked about that and announced it. I went over to Vanderbilt and had a press meeting and a lot of people there, and we talked about these on the standards on this core curriculum. And reporters came up to me afterwards, and the first question I got from a TV reporter was, well, you can't possibly expect kids in these inner city neighborhoods to adhere to the same set of standards and have the same stuff as you do in the suburbs. My reaction was, if you could think of some perverse way to hurt that child in the inner city more, I don't know what it would be than to start them out at age 4 with the assumption that obviously they're never going to be able to do these other kinds of things. So I just think whether it be in the inner city or in these rural schools or for anybody really, that's setting those standards high. Kids respond to expectations, set them low, and they respond to those too. Setting those standards high, and then us having to roll our sleeves up and do the work that it takes to get that stuff to happen, to give the teachers the tools they need to teach to that, is really what education is all about. But it starts with those high standards.
I would just add two more points, Hans. To the governor's point, this is really going to call into question the support structures that are in place for teachers and students. And historically, we've largely defined supports, at least in the education community, as before and after school programs. We've not thought about the broader set of supports that are going to be needed. And I think that's going to, particularly in this climate, this fiscal climate, going to require some significant thought into the reallocation of resources that line up, not just from education, but from the human service agencies as well. The other more specific response to your question is, in raising these high expectations, I'm always intrigued by the numbers we see for the students, the increase in the number of students who are taking these dual enrollment classes. And then for those states that have robust data systems, those same students finding themselves in remedial math and English when they get to college. I think we're really going to have to take a look at the quality of those courses. We have a quality control mechanism in place, I think, for the AP programs, and the more we scale up dual enrollment, the more we're going to have to think about the quality control mechanisms that states put in place, so that if you're taking college-level learning, that you're not just taking a science course, a college science course, but it's not just a college science course by title only, but the content of that science course is college-level material, so that the student's able to succeed when they get to college in those courses.
Thank you, Dane. John?
Yeah, just one quick thing. Through both our work with the network states and as well as our annual survey of all 50 states, we've been able to really watch and monitor how these pieces of the college and career agenda have evolved. And one of the things that sort of below the surface, not only as Mike mentioned, are these other pieces moving forward are not yet to the level that we would report out in this report, but that they begin to really intersect across the policy agenda. Dane suggested through the data systems you can begin to sort of see where there are disconnects. And not only are states grappling with the challenges of implementation, looking at graduation requirements, for instance, and seeing what it means to implement that at the classroom level, whether through end-of-course assessments that are a growing sort of phenomenon across the K-12 system. So it's really, we've seen that the states really, as they deal with implementation, deal with the very challenges that you're talking about. So while we report out about each of sort of the pillars, the work across these pillars and the work underneath the surface and the things that are moving forward are not yet kind of in place yet, really do reflect that the states are very aware of these, the concern you raise, and are moving to sort of make sure that those problems don't arise once requirements take hold.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Yeah.
Ace Parsi from the Alliance for Excellent Education. Thank you for the report. This has been really informative. I have a question besides the numbers of states that are meeting these benchmarks. What states did you find are creating great synergies between the standards, assessments, accountability? And then the second question would be whether good, high-quality teaching to meet college and career readiness standards seems to be the same as meeting the previous standards, if you found anything in that area as well.
So on the second issue, first on high-quality teaching, I think what I would say there is that's not an issue we have addressed frontally. We've been focused on the expectations, but it's quite clear, to go back to an earlier point, that without efforts to improve the quality of teaching, the preparation of teachers, the content expertise of teachers, their pedagogical and instructional expertise. If we don't do that, then we will have higher standards and a relatively small number of additional students who actually meet them. So that is a critical issue. There are quite a few states that are experimenting with approaches on that. And one of the promising things, to pick up on a point that John raised, one of the promising developments here is that the data systems that are being built will enable us to identify and learn which teachers are doing a really good job at this and which ones are doing a less good job, and learn from that in terms of what needs to be improved. I know that in Tennessee, the teacher quality issues have been particularly important. Governor, I don't know if you want to comment on that, but I'm hoping you do.
I really see it in two ways. First of all, I mean, there's a lot of teachers we have in the state who are in the beginnings, the middle of their careers, and have a lot of years to go with us. This obviously puts new demands on it, and I think that, one of the things we're trying to come to grips with is exactly what kinds of support do you need to give to those teachers to enable them to help move toward these standards. We've found that most teachers have actually been quite supportive of this. our various local teachers unions have been, on the whole, very supportive of these efforts, and I think they're definitely going to be there. The other thing that we're doing is interesting. I think in some ways we've done a lot of things in education, but I think this one I'll mention now is probably the most radical and has gotten very little attention anywhere. And that is that we just completely opened up the process by which you obtain a teaching certificate in the state of Tennessee. I mean, in Tennessee today, the schools of education are not in a monopoly position. There are multiple routes to a teaching certificate in Tennessee, including just, graduating from college with a degree in physics, or any other. I think physics is wonderful, but any other subject as well. And I think what's going to happen is that, first of all, it's going to just open up the pool of human capital beyond those who decided, some terrific people who decided when they were sophomores in college that that's what they wanted to do with their lives. And second of all, I think there's a huge scope for people moving in and out of these professions. I mean, I was talking earlier, I spent 5 or 6 years of my life as a computer programmer in my 20s. It wasn't necessary, particularly what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. It made sense for me during that period of time as a way to earn a living and do things. I think the world's full of people for whom teaching some in their 20s or teaching some in their 30s or teaching some when they retire at 55 is a good way for them to do it. And we need to make sure we open up the paths to them as well, just as any other successful business does. So we're trying to do it by really with two hands. One, we have a huge cadre of really good dedicated teachers. We want to make sure we do the things it takes to support them in getting these new skills. We also want to just open up the door and make better use of the broad spectrum of talent we have in the state to help in teaching our kids.
Thank you. Looks like Dane, you want to respond?
Yeah, just two additional points, Mike. One is I think the work that states like Louisiana are doing and mapping back to where those teachers were prepared and how their students are performed is some exciting work that we're encouraged by and are talking with other states who want to model that. The other is, if you think about the evaluation of teachers, and we really don't use, we only have about 14 states who have a state-wide evaluation of their teachers. But more important than just evaluating or using the evaluation tool as a hammer, we really don't use evaluation, even in those states that have those systems, as a professional growth opportunity for the teachers. And that can only happen by principals who are actually trained on how to better evaluate the teachers for which they have the responsibility for rendering those judgments, if you will. So we need to do more work on creating better instruments, but we also need more states to think about the role evaluation plays at the statewide level, because there's great variation from district to district. Most districts have an evaluation tool, but there's significant variation. If we could think about at the state level how we come up with a design that everyone in the state of Michigan could use, I think we could kind of scale and improve the quality of teaching in those states.
Thank you. Additional questions? Well, if not, I want to do a couple things. First of all, thank all of you for coming to this event. Thank you for your interest in this issue, and I hope that you will continue to be involved in it and pay attention to it as time goes on. Secondly, at the top of the event, I thank John Kraman and Maria O'Hara for their work on the report. I also want to acknowledge Sandy Boyd at Achieve, who's done a terrific job in bringing this report all the way to conclusion and in organizing this event. But I also want you to know that the results in this report, right, are the product, first and foremost, of the work that the states have done. But almost all of the Achieve staff is involved in helping states do that work. So we take some measure of pride in the progress that we're seeing. And I want to thank all of my colleagues at Achieve for the work that they have done. And then finally, I want to ask you to join me in thanking the panelists again for making this an informative session. So thank you very much.